So Elias, you came back to us. We're so excited to have you join us today again. Um, you were such a hit the first time that we had people like we didn't get to finish the conversation. So we're like, we have to have you back, and everybody was asking for you back, and we got so much amazing feedback. So first off, thank you for coming back. And for those who don't know who Elias is, he is an incredible person and a director of recruiting at Quantix. He has over 20 years of experience. Hiring in the tech space and other spaces, hiring hundreds of PMs, thousands of candidates. He's full of knowledge. He's now an author. So he's going to talk to us a little bit about that as well, because he's now written a book that is going to help everyone continue to, get hired. It's From a Recruiter's Brain. So it's a fun title too. I'm not going to talk anymore though, because people are here to talk to you. So Elias, if you want to do any other quick intro, and then we'll let Justin kick it off today.
No, I think you did a great job. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I've been recruiting for over 20 years, like you said, in the excuse me, in the agency world, which I think is an important point, because I've seen clients on all spectrums of the industry, all different types of positions, and that's where my knowledge comes from, is really seeing so many different hiring managers in different spaces for different positions, and kind of just trying to pull all that information together and get a overriding feel for what people tend to look for. So thank you, and thanks for having me back, guys. I
Yeah,
love being
Thank you
on
for
here,
coming
and
back.
the
we're so
questions never
excited for this.
yeah, the questions never seem to all get answered on any of the lives that I've done with even the Never Search Alone network and stuff. Never seem to get through them all in the time that we have.
Perfect. So let's jump straight in. First,
Yep.
welcome to everybody who has been dropping in the chat. We appreciate your support. I'm going to kick things off we talked about resumes and the initial job searching process. Let's move over to interviews for a moment. And one of the first things that happens in the interview process is that a hiring manager or a recruiter is going to ask you a set of questions and build an impression of you as a candidate. Where in the interview do you find are the most critical points to creating a first impression?
It's a really good question, and I think there's a couple different answers. There's in-person interviews and the more ubiquitous, video interviews these days. I actually think that the impression starts even before that first question. I've seen too many cases where people are late to a video interview,
Uh,
even, or to an in-person interview, or are dressed, and I say unprofessionally, but even just a shirt like you're wearing, Justin, like you don't have to wear a tie and a suit, but just a professional looking shirt, aren't doing that on a video or in-person interview. And that is where the first impression starts, is if you're late, if you don't test your video, test your microphone before a video interview, and then you're fumbling around with technology, it's a terrible impression, right? And that you have to, that's like being late to a in-person interview because you didn't map it and you didn't know where to go, and you didn't realize, that you had to find parking or whatever it is, right? You have to figure all those things out. So I think that first impression, you got to think even before that first question and really say, I have to prepare. I can't tell you how many people don't figure out that their microphone isn't working, for example, or their Wi-Fi isn't, whatever it is. It's crazy.
and I've also something that I don't know if I've read it or it's just something that I have known for a while. In addition to testing everything ahead of time, at least wearing a shirt that looks professional, even if you're wearing the pajama pants under it, which I'm doing right now, right? Is also, I've read that like you want to also, because you want to be the first one there by a minute or two, right? And then that when the video comes on, you don't want to be looking anywhere else. You already want to be focused completely on that person and ready to start that rapport building, because that rapport building can do a lot as well before you actually start the interview. Is that
I
correct?
I would agree. Don't like launch the Teams video and then go get a drink of water, right? Get it so if the person jumps on early, the manager jumps on 5 minutes early, it's a blank screen because you've walked off, right? It still just doesn't come across the best. Um, if you're able to, yeah, get everything ready, get prepared, get set, sit down, obviously have a, have a decent shirt on, and be ready to go, so that if they do come on 5 minutes early and they want to start chatting, then you can get into exactly what you're talking about, Justin, that like, hey, get to know you, talk a little bit about whatever. It could be the weather at that point if you're before the interview, but you're building that connection and you're showing, hey, I'm professional, I got here, I'm ready to go, I'm prepared, I know what I'm talking about. Like those are the first things for sure.
So one of the things that you emphasized was the way that you're perceived visually, whether the dress, the posture, and the punctuality. But I have a question for you to follow up on that, which is, does the dress, is there a certain kind of dress code that you should be matching? Should it be towards the culture of the organization that you're working for, or do you want to go one step higher, like in consulting?
Yeah, that's a good, I mean, that's a really good question too. And it's hard to know, right? Because if you haven't seen the company, if this is your first interview, you don't really know what their dress culture might be. I do think in general, the one step above is always a good kind of concept. I don't think, I mean, I can't think I've ever heard of somebody having a negative review in an interview because they overdressed. But I've definitely had people get negative reviews because they underdressed. And you don't have to wear a suit. Like I said, you don't even have to wear a tie, as a man, you just a shirt with a collar, something that just doesn't look like a ripped stained t-shirt. You can get away with that. Same thing for women, right? Just something that looks like you would wear it to work, right? Um, these are good questions to ask if you have an interview with a manager and you went through an agency, or if you have an interview with a manager and you're working through the corporate recruiter and you're unsure. Just ask them, right? I mean, hey, what should I wear? Is this a suit and tie situation, or is it a little more casual than that? Certainly, an agency recruiter will be able to answer that for you, and I would hope the corporate recruiter would be willing to help you out a little bit with that too.
So before we dive into, because I know Justin's going to have a lot of specific interview questions. I want to jump to back to the beginning of the interview really quick with rapport building, because you posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. You spoke to how sometimes you never know what's going to get you hired, especially if you've got two people who are, pretty much identical in experience and have both aced their interviews. And you spoke to, you never know, like I think it was like the hiring manager and the one of the candidates both bonded over golf or something like that. And you spoke to a little bit, and I think that's interesting for the audience to hear, because that for those first few minutes really can set the tone of the interview. And I just want you to kind of hone in on that a little bit before we dive into the deeper interview stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the example that you're thinking about is yeah, the manager was an archaeology buff, and the candidate had a degree in archaeology, and the job was not an archaeologist. So they just kind of bonded over her degree and the fact that he was kind of a buff in that area, and she ended up getting the job. And the other example I gave is the whole reason I got into this business is because I was delivering pizzas after I was laid off from my job before I ever became a recruiter.
Wow.
I I was interviewing. I was on like my fourth interview with Alumni Consulting. The owners were a little nervous about bringing me on because I had no experience. And the head salesperson, he had delivered pizzas after he quit being a lawyer because he hated it. He said, I couldn't sleep at night. So I quit and I just started delivering pizzas to do something to make a little money. And when they learned that about me, what he told the owners was, if this guy's willing to deliver pizzas at night, he's going to be a hard worker. We should hire him. That's literally the piece that tipped me over the edge into this industry that I've now been in for 25 years. So you don't know. So, I think doing some research is helpful, right?
Mhm.
This is an area where if you like, I would never have known that John had delivered pizzas. It wasn't on his LinkedIn, but certainly something like a degree in archaeology, if you can look up the manager, look up, you know, what their degree might be in, where they went to school, what does their career look like? Have they written any articles, or have they written a book? Have they, anything that you can touch on that shows A, you paid a little bit of attention, but
Mhm.
B, even if they don't realize, hey, this person went and looked up my LinkedIn and is commenting on it, it's a way to build that connection. Hey, I saw you have a degree in this, or I saw you wrote this book, or that post you wrote was really interesting. You know, what do you think of this aspect of that? You know, those are all things you can do in that beginning part of the interview that can help build that rapport, or you can work it in as you go. I mean, you know, that tell
Sure.
us about yourself. That's a good way that if you noticed something and you're able to work it in
Mm,
to help build that rapport. Like, I don't think our archaeology person did that, right? It was just
yeah,
No.
happenstance.
Yeah.
But she could have, right? If the manager had a degree in archaeology and she had a degree, she could have brought that up at some point to say, hey, we both have degrees in archaeology. That's really interesting. How did you end up in this field from that? You know, I mean, there's ways you can phrase things. Like, my degree is chemistry. I don't do anything with chemistry. You know, but if I was interviewing with someone and I saw they had a chemistry degree, I probably would bring it up in the interview. I'd be like,
No.
hey, we
Yeah.
both have degrees. You know, so there's a lot of things that you can do. And preparation, I saw one person said intel is key. Preparation is key. Most people go into interviews not as prepared as they
Unprepared.
should be. They don't look up the company. They don't read about the job description. They don't look up the manager. They
Right.
aren't ready to go on the video. They haven't tested their stuff. Do that homework. That's going to help you more than a lot of things will in the interview process.
So let's talk about this a little bit. We covered the idea that you research your audience ahead of time to find out if there's some commonalities because people hire people they want to work with and they work
Right?
with people that they like or can relate to. So it comes down to the first question, which is the concept of tell me about yourself. And there is that initial piece of prep that has to come in where you, in 90 seconds to 120, identify key points, which is where did you come from in relation to the skills and job set role? What is the value proposition in terms of the industry, the business functions, and the achievements that you have, and where are you going now? I want you to just kind of talk through us if that's the commonality structure to building a tell you about yourself or walk me through your resume that people should be prepared for.
Yeah. That.
also
No, go
also,
ahead.
does it need to be the 90 to 120 seconds? Because I feel differently. So I'd love your thought on that of what the timeline should be. But yes, continue.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, and every interview's structured a little differently. So
Okay.
if they start with the tell me about yourself, I would probably try to keep it to a couple minutes at
Okay.
most because you don't want to dominate the conversation, which is actually one of the outside of just not being qualified. You know, that's one of the biggest things I hear about people getting rejected. They talk
Interesting.
too much. They
Huh.
don't give the questioner a chance to even ask any more questions. They take one and they run with it, spin off onto tangents, and I've had that feedback. It's one of the top 5 for sure in my career, where the manager says, "I only got 2 questions off in 30 minutes." I couldn't even really evaluate them,
I do that.
and now
It has to be a
we're
dialogue. I get
we're
it.
moving on. So yeah, so I think you want to keep it short. If it's just that tell me about yourself, you could try to bring in those commonalities. The walk me through your resume is also a tough one. I don't like that question personally, but it doesn't mean people won't ask it.
They will.
I
Yeah.
think if I were asked that, I might come back with a question on that one. I might come back and say, you know, what
What do you want
what
to know?
what aspects about my background are of most interest to you, or are there specific accomplishments or things that I've done that you'd like me to touch on or highlight? If they don't really give you much to go with, which can happen, this is where having some research into that job description can help, because you want to be able to tailor what you're talking about to the job and to the things that they look like they want to accomplish. So if you can't get that, you're kind of stuck. You're going to have to try to walk yourself through the resume in relation to the job as you know it. That's the best thing you can do, right? Don't go off on things that aren't in the job description. But if you
Yep.
can ask and figure out what they really are trying to get at, like, you know, what initiative, what problems are you trying to solve by hiring this position? Then maybe you can touch on the things you've done that would help solve those problems. Um, that's a tough one. It really is.
Yeah,
And again,
that's
you don't want to dominate it for too long. If they're, you know, walk me through your resume, I think, you know, if I wasn't given anything else, I probably would give them the real quick 50,000-foot view. Like, started out in recruiting with this, became a manager in '04, hired these people, you know, moved over to Quantix, blah blah blah. I'd probably try to keep it to a couple minutes and then say,
Yeah,
and
they'll deep
kind of
dive into
hopefully
a
they'll throw
particular
some
thing.
questions and
Yeah.
get
Yeah,
into the nitty gritty, because you can't. I've had people do that where they start talking about their background and they just go, and they aren't touching necessarily on the things that I care about.
exactly.
So if
I
they go for too long, you can't get to it.
I love that because that is I started getting that question this year. I'd never gotten it before. And the first few times I was like, I literally was like, okay, let me walk you through my resume. So I love the idea of asking if there's something they want to hone in on. And then the second thing being, if they can't answer you, just know that what they're looking for and only highlight on that, because I was lost. That is, you're right. That is an insanely hard one to answer and keep at a minimum, especially if you've got 20 years experience. It's like, okay, let me
Right.
give you my life history lesson. So
Yep,
awesome.
absolutely.
So yeah, I think in the chat we've got a few conversations that I want to harp in on for a moment, which is, this is your first impression to see if you can distill down your career into the value that people are looking for. Can you articulate the pieces of information, and are you able to work with one another in a collaborative manner, not just go on a diatribe for 10 minutes of here's my resume? And I actually treat both the same. Walk me through your resume and the 90-second, 120-second pitch. But I want to move it to a different direction for a second, which is towards that continued bias. There are other things that impact in the interview process, Elias. They could be small things, and I just want you to kind of give us, from your experience, what sort of things kind of are an X on a person's name, or people are kind of looked at differently after that comes out of their mouth in an interview.
Negative talking
Yeah.
about a former employer is a
Yeah.
huge no-no, right? Don't
Yeah.
do that. That definitely is going to get you scuttled most times, right? Um, I think talking over people is never good. That's going to be something that is going to really rule you out pretty fast. And then, I know it's like a Goldilocks situation, so I hate saying it, but talking too much or too little, because that's the other thing I hear is, they gave us like one sentence answers or one word answers, so I couldn't really evaluate whether or not what they'd done. Do you have and some of it's a problem with the interviewers, right? Like if you ask, do you have experience in this? Yes. Okay, that's a terrible question, and B, a terrible answer, right? If they give you yes or no questions like that, you got to give more
They'll
than that.
expand.
They don't want you to just say yes. They want you to expand on it and tell them, what you've done with that skill or in that area, or how you used it to build an accomplishment or whatever for the company. But I think as far as like instant things, don't talk over people. Don't be negative. Don't again, this is kind of Goldilocks too, but you have to be you have to talk enough about what you did versus what we
Yes.
did or the
Yes.
team did. And I definitely see it more that way than the other. I hear far less feedback where people say, well, they don't seem like a team player because they only talked about what they did. I don't hear that very often. I think you portray team workingness, whatever the word is, by just being like a reasonable human and having a good dialogue. But I do hear a lot, we don't know what that person did because every answer said we did this, the team did
Right.
that. And if you do that through the whole interview, that's definitely something that people take note of. And you're like, well, what did you actually do?
Right, you gotta probe it and be like and try and get it, and it's then when you probe that if they still can't say what they did, they didn't actually do it. So
Probably not. And that happens all the time. All the time. I mean, we interview as agency recruiters people, and if they can't articulate it to us, then we're really not going to submit them. And I think, that actually brings up another quick point. When you're talking to a recruiter, either agency or corporate, you have to remember they don't really know that the ultimate job that well, right?
Mhm.
Remember, they are not technical. They are not an accountant. They are not a financial analyst. They are not a project manager. They don't know the nitty gritty of everything. So you have to be able to explain it in a way that they can understand. And that's one thing I actually have trained my recruiters on, is if you ask a question about what you did with XYZ or how you did this or what did you do in this area, and they can't explain it in a way you understand, I don't know if they're a great candidate, right? You need to be able to put it into like layman's terms and describe it so that anyone can understand it. And that actually demonstrates a better understanding, in my opinion.
So I want to dig into this really quick, but then we've got a lot of really good questions in the chat. So we're going to shift in a second on that. But speaking to what you were talking about, if you need to understand that. So generally, one of the common formats is going to be star, right? Or car, where you're providing a little bit of context so that you can explain what you did with the situation. So for those who don't know, star, you've got situation, task, action, result. For car, you've got context, action, result. I also like to say bar raisers, right? You're going to add, uh, what you learned from it, how you would improve in the future. So I'd love to know if you think there's something else to level up those types of questions. I also think the star formats, while they're intimidating, they're actually can be used as tools to help us succeed in the answers because we frame it that way. But I'd love your thoughts on that and what can help you kind of raise the bar with that. And then we'll jump to the questions.
No, the star interview method is great. I mean, I recommend it to people. I think I've had managers tell me that they like when people use that method of answering their questions. So I definitely agree. And it's also a way to make sure, if you follow it, that you are talking about results, which I think is the key. That's the key part of the whole thing. Too many people, and this is on a resume too, by the way, they just talk about the little things they did, but they don't say what it accomplished. What were the results of those actions? And the thing, I tell people this all the time too, you're getting hired to either, unless it's a nonprofit, and that's a different thing, but you're getting hired to either make the company money or save the company money. That's really about it, right? When you boil it down your job, that's what you're there to do. So you have to figure out, how do you portray to people, I made my last company money or I saved them money by doing X, Y, and Z. Like, that's essentially what all interviews kind of distill down to in terms of, what did you do? How did you do it? How do you fit this job? You're trying to say, I did this, this, and this, and it accomplished this, right? That's the key part. And most people, a lot of people, leave it off their resume and don't do a good job of bringing that up in the interview.
Awesome. So we've got some questions that have been coming up. Uh,
Yeah.
Justin, is there one you wanted to tackle first?
Let's tackle Monica's for a second. So,
Okay.
Elias, when it comes to the interview process, some people are just starting out. How do they present themselves with either that 90-second introduction or just portray how do they drive the interview process with no actual tangible experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think some of that still has to be about kind of how you got where you are, right? Like what did you do along the is it college? Is it schooling of, trade school, or classes or certifications, or you talk about kind of what you did to get to this interview point. Like, why are you going after this job? I think is how you need to talk about that. And then, man, the rest of it's probably going to have to be trying to pull out, if they're asking, again, it kind of depends on the questions. Like, if you're just introducing yourself, I think, again, quick overview of how you got there and who you are, and what you're excited about for this company in this position. Then they're going to have to ask you questions, and then you're going to have to try to answer those about, if they ask work related questions, you got to find whatever jobs you had and
Yeah.
pull things out of those jobs or out of your schooling projects you did there, and pull those things out as they apply to the job. I would hope in an entry level role, you're not getting beat up too badly on that. Like,
Behavioral.
walk me through your resume. Like, I don't really have a resume. What are you talking about? I would hope that the interviewer has a little, enough savvy to say, if you walk me through your background, it's going to really be schooling, certifications, how you got here.
So, before we tackle Joe's comment here for a second,
Go ahead.
um, Elias, if you were to kind of put like a categorical theme here of what things do hiring managers and recruiters look for from a skills perspective in an interview process, one is obviously going to be around communication, and the second is around the ability to summarize in a coherent manner. What other things do they look for?
Well, listening, right? So you're answering the question that's asked. I mean, honestly, this is another big thing we hear, right? They didn't appear to be paying attention because they weren't answering the questions that we asked. Like, I hear that a lot.
I write it down because I forget. In interviews, you get nervous. So I actually let them know ahead of time that I'm going to be writing their questions down so then I can look at it. Because you do, like, it's like you get so nervous that you forget what they ask. So that's a really good way, I think, anyway. And most hiring managers have respected that I make sure I understand the question before I answer it.
Yeah, and ask for clarification on that too, right? If you, I like the idea of writing it up, but if you don't fully understand the question or what they're trying to get out of you with that question, ask for clarification. You're much better off doing that than fumbling around and getting it wrong or going to a wrong conclusion. So I think, what you said, Justin, right? Summarizing, being able to summarize your skills, good communication skills, um, you know, try to make decent eye contact, and I know some people have trouble with that, but do your best, right? And don't talk over people, don't interrupt, like those types of things, but also make sure, yeah, you're really hearing what they're asking, and yeah, ask for clarification. I think that's another big one, that we see feedback coming down outside of like the person just didn't have enough experience in this area, right? Or wasn't from this industry. You can't control that. You either have it or you don't.
I would hope that in the resume screening that comes across, but I've come to situations where it's like, yeah, I don't have that experience. Why are we even talking? But I don't say it like that. It's in the 90-second pitch. And they're like, oh, I thought you had other experience in industries. And it's like, well, that's why the 90-second pitch is so important. But I think we're going to put something up from Joe's comment. And then I have
Yeah,
another question.
it's interesting, and it takes us back to the pitch, right? So
Right.
Joe mentioned that he asked if he can lead off the discussion. I've never heard of this. I feel like as a recruiter, I would be taken aback, but I'm not a recruiter, so I want to hear from you.
I don't think I've ever had somebody ask me that when I'm doing my interviews of people. I mean, I've refined my technique over the years. I've found that what I like to do is I just tell people, hey, I'm going to tell you about the job. I basically like lay it out. I'm like, I'm
Right.
going to tell you about the job. I'm going to tell you about the company, and then I'm going to try to get you to tell me about what you've done as it relates to it. So here's the company, and I describe it. Here's the job they're looking to fill. Here are the key skills. And then I say, tell me about what you've been doing in your last few jobs and how it relates to the job that I just described. And that's it. And then we just have a conversation from there. But a lot of people will ask very specific questions. So, I mean, from what Joe said, I'm trying to think how that might be taken.
I've definitely gotten in trouble for it when
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
much
coming,
younger. Let them
yeah,
do
I
the
think
song
coming
and
in and
dance.
yeah, I think coming in and just saying, "Hey, I want to start this off." I might caution people on that one. I mean, I'm not saying it's a terrible technique. It may have worked for Joe really well. I'm just saying I could see people being put off by that, depending on their personality and the way
Yeah.
they run an interview and feel like, hey, I'm in charge of this interview, right? Why are you taking things over?
We got a question from Ashish asking how to read visual questions from the interview to understand when you're either over speaking or under speaking. I just wanted to highlight, Ashish, we actually covered this exactly in All on Communication with the Josh Hammond Live. So we go into all of those cues. So that would be a really good reference. If Elias, you want to answer it really quickly, you can, but I would just refer back to that because we literally was all cues. So
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about like when you can realize someone's tuning out, basically.
yeah.
Yeah, I think if you, it's hard in a phone interview, right? In a video interview or in person. I mean, if you see they're just fiddling around, not paying attention anymore, not making eye contact with you, start picking up that maybe you've talked too much, or they're not interested in what you're saying anymore. Um, Phone interview is hard. I mean, I guess if you hear them start to try to cut in, you
Mhm.
might realize you're talking too much. Um, but I'm definitely not an expert in that area. I would, if you guys did a whole thing on it, that's probably far better
Yeah.
than my feedback.
Yeah, we definitely dug into it. Cool. All right.
So we
Justin,
got,
any more go ahead.
One thing I wanted to
yeah,
quickly mention, because we are talking about it, I have heard and talked to people who talk about the AI interviews that are happening. I know you mentioned that earlier
yeah. I
anyway.
was going to transition to that after this question, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, the like I've heard some of them will put a little box and your head needs to be in this box
Oh.
or you get dinged. Your eye contact has to be there. You have to look at your little camera. If you look, it counts that some of them, depending on the AI interviewer, will count how many times you look away, look down, move your head, and it will negatively impact you that way. I will never at my company endorse an AI interview for the beginning. I don't, because it's stuff like that. I
Mhm.
don't love that kind of stuff. I don't think that really makes any, difference to how good of a candidate you are. However, I think people should know that those are things you got to keep in mind when you're doing um, an AI interview, right? You have to make sure. I might try to look up if you can figure out like the AI model. I mean, it won't be, or the company that built that AI tool. You might be able to find it from a link or something that's sent to you. Look up feedback. Look up if there's people writing about what this AI model or interview tool tends to ding you for, because a lot of them are different. There's all these different things that I'm hearing that are all different based on the tool. So that's one big thing I think I would do is try to figure out, like, what do I have to do to pass this AI interview?
Gotcha.
Are you, because if they have guardrails to check your eyesight, but let's talk about for a moment, you're on the phone and they're using an AI script. Are you more are you bothered by that? Because I mean, AI goes both ways. Recruitment is using AI for screening, and that's also leading to its own kind of problems. And you've got interviewing processes that both sides are probably using. I'm sure interviewers are also creating questions using AI.
Yep. It's Man, it's tricky. Personally, I would really try not to use AI during an interview. I know that I can't remember the name of it, but there's one that you can actually have it up listening to the interview questions and it will help you answer them. Um, Personally, I wouldn't do that. I think you're definitely running a risk. I see a lot of companies saying, if I see an AI generated resume, or if I know you're using AI in the interview, you're immediately going to be rejected. And then people's response is, well, you expect us to use AI in our jobs and you're using AI. Why can't
That's a fair
we?
point.
It's a fair point. But the problem is it's like tilting
But you
against
can't
windmills, right?
you
You
can't
can't
assess
argue
it.
that
No,
because, and also you can't go ahead. I mean, I think I said this to somebody, go ahead and don't apply to any of those companies then, but they're not going to care. That's the problem. Unless you get all job seekers to say, I refuse to do that,
yeah,
it's not going away.
no.
And as the candidate market shifts, it might, right? You might suddenly find that top candidates that companies want are like, no, I'm not doing that. And then things may change. But when the market's like it is, you kind of have to play the game, unfortunately.
Well, this
So,
is sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is where I think attention to detail comes in, especially when you're doing your resume. Not even though M dashes are regular parts of grammar, don't use
Right.
them. Make sure all of your punctuation is the same, because we are going to use AI and it's going to help us frame it better, but also be able to, what is it called? Be able to make sure the formatting is correct, like everything looks right, and that you can speak to everything that's in your resume. So, because it's hard for, if there's too many like common things, like I think I pointed this out a few days ago to someone. If your resume is in the font Aptos, it's like copied and pasted from Chat GPT,
Oh,
basically,
really?
right?
I didn't
So
know
there's
that.
certain, oh yeah, it formats that straight in there. So like there are certain things that it's like we're all going to use Chat GPT, but we should be able to be detail oriented enough, right? That we're not, it shouldn't look like that. It should just be a professional resume that speaks to what we do. Anyway, I
Yep.
kind of went off topic
Mm,
there.
No, 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 but it's a good point because it's same thing with interviewing. I wouldn't use it to try to help you in the interview process because,
No.
again, you're going to end up probably looking like you're doing something, right? Or they hear the tapping on the keyboard, which is feedback I've heard more than once. Sounded like he was looking stuff up, right? We get that. I'm serious. We get it all. I get it all the time. So I would not go that route
okay,
personally.
here's what I would kind of just capstone this before we transition to Srikana's question is under AI, if you have a discrepancy between what you're writing and how you're speaking with AI versus how you are without it, then it's just going to lead to a negligent hire. You're not doing yourself favors to try to get through the process and then get kicked out anyways. You want to demonstrate your skill set. That's the entire interview process. How you think, how you speak, and what you bring to the table. I know that people are looking for jobs. I understand, but using these types of tools and then there's a disconnect between what you put on paper and how you are on screen, that's very jarring and can leave you blacklisted, right, Elias?
Oh yeah, I mean, there definitely recruiters will, especially in a specific company, and if it's a big enough company, you'll get marked "Do not hire" in the ATS, and every recruiter in that company has access to that ATS, and looks up candidates. I mean, that's what people do in companies is when they're hiring, you look up to see has this person applied before, has anyone interviewed them before, what sort of feedback do they have. You don't want a whole bunch of negative commentary in there. Just being not a fit is fine. That's not going to
Yeah.
hurt you. Coming across like you're cheating or lying, that could hurt you for sure.
Well, I think we see that a lot too in LinkedIn with the use of AI is that as you work to become a thought leader, and I know Justin, you want to get to that question, but as we work to become, thought leaders, right? Are we being true to who we are when we post? Because if a recruiter comes to you for your LinkedIn profile, for your thought leadership, it looks like you can solve problems, and then you get on the interview and it's like, yeah, they can't back up anything they say. It's just the same as the resume, right? It's like you I mean, don't just make yourself look good for the sake of looking good, because we'll be able to read through the lines really quickly the second we get on a call with you to actually speak with you. You wanted to go over that question, right, Justin?
Yes. So, Shrikana or Sirikana, how do you handle a situation when an interview doesn't ask you to introduce yourself, but just jumps into the questions? How can we give them a brief introduction to build that first impression?
Man, that's a tough one too, because you don't want to come across like, again, you're not paying attention or not listening to what they're asking you. Because if they ask a question and then you say, well, let me tell you about myself first, that definitely can come across like, you know, were you not listening? So I think your best bet is to answer the question, right? And then if you can follow up with a question, right? Maybe is there more information I can give you? Is there information about my, in my background or my resume that you would like to hear more about as it relates to that question? Or, I think your best bet is going to be coming from asking questions versus trying to just put information out there. I don't know. To me, that's one of the best ways you can build rapport in an interview is by asking questions. Now you don't want to you got to answer their questions. You can't flip it completely and just ask, only be asking. But I do think that shows it shows some curiosity. It shows you're trying to build a rapport, and people like to, most people don't mind a little back and forth. I mean, I get that feedback too. They didn't have any questions. That's a definite negative feedback that I've heard.
Let's go into that really quick. And I do want to switch in a minute to go to some of the myths that we're seeing. But that's a really, speaking of what questions do we ask? Like, I know one of the things I love to ask are, what are the success metrics for this role in XYZ? What problem are you trying to solve? What are some like solid questions you think can come from the interviewees or the candidates that will show that they are actually interested in being successful and help the company grow?
Well, definitely asking that. I like that question, right? Like, what are the accomplishments you're trying to get to with this role? Like, what are you looking for? What are we trying to accomplish in this team? Why are you filling this position? Those are good questions to ask. I also really like questions that come about the company, right? That you've looked
Mhm.
up, they're about us, something about their culture, about stuff that they're doing right now, like what products are they launching? Is there a merger M&A activity going on? What's happening in this company's timeline that you can ask about, and maybe how this role relates to some of those things, and try to build in that back and forth there too. I don't know. I ask this question of managers when I get an opening. I don't know. I'll see what you guys think of it. I don't mind the question of, what have you not seen in previous candidates for this position? Or why have
I've
previous
asked that.
candidates not been successful in this role? I don't like the question, why wouldn't you hire me? Right. Or what haven't you seen? I don't like that ending
Mhm.
the interview with that, like, have I given you any
Answered
information that would
everything.
make you would not want to hire me? well, now you're just asking them to come up with the negative stuff about you. I don't like that question. But I think if you can flip it at some point, and what are you not seeing in people? What are you looking for that previous candidates don't have, or where they haven't been successful? You can touch on those things, especially if you have them, and try to, use that as leverage, I guess.
Yeah, I've asked that question before, and you can see they appreciate it, right? Because you're actually, and it does give you that opportunity to then be like, oh, well, I can speak to this without, yeah, having it be negative. Yep.
I
Sorry,
asked it.
Justin,
Yeah.
go
I
ahead.
asked the other way. I asked it
You did.
very
I've asked it that way
boldly.
too.
I would ask, "Is there any reservations based on the skill set and
Mhm.
the discussion that we've had today that you're hesitant or concerned about that I can help elaborate further?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I've
get it.
heard, I
I've
get
done
like,
both. Yeah.
I get both. Yeah, I see both sides of it, and I hear both arguments. Just personally, I don't. I think I'd shy away from the the
No,
one
I
you
get
did,
your
Justin.
advice. Yes,
Just
instead of
just
setting
because
to a negative and
I
putting
just
him
feel like it's
defensive.
usually done at the end of the interview, right? And now
Yeah.
you're
Mhm.
leaving the interviewer with negative information about you that they
Mhm.
had to think of. And I don't know. That's just my opinion, though.
No, I think
You
you
know what I
framed it perfectly, which is don't end the interview negatively. And the way that you guys tailor the question to the outside instead of yourself, that takes the focal point in a different framing perspective, which is a great way to segue into myths.
All right. So, Elias, you are very vocal on LinkedIn, which I love. So, guys, if you were not following Elias, like you want to follow him because he actually puts out amazing tips and thought leadership posts on all of this.
Thank
But
you.
some of the things that you speak at or I've seen you comment on are people write, don't do this or do this. That's going to block you from getting jobs. One of them recently was saying how you have to name your resume. And you were like, this is ridiculous. So, what are some of these common things that you keep hearing that you want to set the record straight for the people that are tuning in?
So there's a couple big ones. There's like the one that 80% of jobs aren't posted, right? I hate
Mhm.
that one because it's just, if you just think about it logically, it's not true. Because if what we're seeing is only 20% of the open jobs, why is anyone unemployed? It doesn't make any sense. So I hate that one. And that one implies that people are only filling jobs with referrals and internal candidates. And what I see from recruiters talking and my own experience, 60% plus of fills still come from applications or people that are sourced by a recruiter. So you're still just someone that nobody knew at that company and you got a job there. That still is the majority way that jobs are filled, regardless of what everybody says. So don't pay anyone for access to the hidden job market because they're just scamming you. Um, that's one of them that I really hate. I also don't like there's a lot of, and I saw the question around the ATS, right? The ATS, the ATS, the ATS. So ATSs don't screen resumes. They just don't. They don't. They're a filing cabinet. The resumes come in, they're in there. A human looks at them. That's how it works. Now, AI, there are tools out there that are scanning resumes before they go into the ATS or somewhere in that spectrum, right? They're bolted on tools that have been created by 1,000 little companies to screen all these resumes. The problem with anyone who says they can help you beat that, or they say beat the ATS still, but it's more. I think we're talking about AI. You can't, and the reason is nobody knows where those tools are trained, what they're looking at. I've tried to build some myself. I've evaluated them. I as a recruiter, I can tell it what I want to weight: titles, longevity at jobs, keywords, different companies, the colleges people have gone to. All these different things have weights that are all determined differently. Not to mention that tool was trained by the company that built it separately from how I'm putting my spin on it. So no AI tool is going to review a resume the same. So you can't beat that. So that's another big myth out there. You can't beat the ATS, you can't beat the AI resume screener because there's no single way to do it. So anyone that's selling that, that's also just patently false. Um, Those are probably the two, and then the other one, it's not so much a myth, but man, the career coaches that are out there that have zero experience in recruiting, hiring, or anything, right? Um, they're perfectly fine career coaches, right? Some of them maybe didn't do recruiting, but have been doing resume writing for 15 years. Okay, they're probably good at it by now. What I can't stand are the people who have 6 months of recruiting experience or none, and then they're out there giving advice to people and saying, well, you need to do this with your resume, and this is how you're getting hired, and no one gets a job from applying to job postings. That stuff is not true, right? And you have to really look at who is writing this content and what their reason is for doing it. And usually it's to sell you something, right? It's to get you to buy their program, to get the hidden job market, to get into, to beat the ATS, to whatever, beat the AI screeners, whatever it is. And that stuff just doesn't really work that way.
So
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So those are my biggest pet peeves and sort of the myths that are
Oh,
out
you
there.
blew up that thread. I read it and I was like, I definitely agree with you. I have an HR undergrad and I don't try to sell myself as a hiring coach or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
So Alan asked a question related to the AI tag-ons, Teal job scan or something similar. I haven't personally used any AI for any of my resume, so I'm going to kick it to you too.
I
Yeah,
haven't either. And honestly, if people are using those, I haven't noticed it. I haven't caught it. Um, I think a Chat GPT resume that's just copied and pasted, those are a little easier to pick up on for some of the things that Elizabeth was talking about. But I don't know much about Teal or JobScan.
so I don't know about Teal. I have spoken with the CEO of JobScan, and their product team, and helped them do some product testing. The I think they're still working through some of the analysis of looking at the keywords contextually. That was the last time I spoke to them. That was one of the areas where I was like, that still needs work. The problem, because I used to use JobScan for every single application. Um, and the way, at least what JobScan used to be, the majority of it was counting the number of keywords and going, like hard skills, soft skills, etc. The problem is, especially now that we have AI and computers have evolved more, the keyword count does not matter. And I mean, I would spend hours and hours and hours optimizing my resume to find a way to get the exact keywords, the exact, is it ing, is it ed, is it s or plural, right? And it's about being contextual now, and our computers are smart enough to recognize how you're putting that in, so it's not about keyword stuffing anymore. So I'd have to go back to them and see if they've solved that. I haven't heard of Teal though.
Yeah, and I will say you still do want to make sure if there are specific, like this, and this is mostly in tech, right? If
Mhm.
there are specific skills that the job is requiring, that you're mentioning them where you use them. And I
Mhm.
think that can apply to a lot of different jobs. And because AI does scan resumes, it does do a little better job than just keyword counting, but it's
Right.
still not smart enough to assume if you put that you were a software engineer as your title and you never mentioned any of the languages you use there, it's not going to be able to
Yeah.
assume or figure out that, well, you used Java in the one before it and Java at the one after it. You probably were still a Java engineer there. It's not going to assume that. It's going to
Yeah.
just say, I don't see evidence of 8+ years of Java on the resume because you only mentioned Java in the last six.
Yeah.
I
No, that
also
makes.
think, like, let's say, and I'm going to use agile, right? If agile is in the resume three or four, or in the job description three or four times, keyword stuffing agile alone is not enough. Or let's say scrum, right? You're going to, if they want scrum, it's a better example than agile, then you're probably going to need to, in your resume, list backlog grooming or retros or sprint planning, right? Like that's probably going to be somewhere in the filter. And you're better at knowing that than I am, Elias, on what kind of goes, how they filter and rank. But if that's what they want you to know, you have to be able to represent that contextually, not just stuff the word scrum in there multiple times.
Yeah, and you want to talk about, yeah, how you use these things, the whole
Mhm.
process, whatever it is that's in the job description. It can't just be in your keyword summary. It can't just be in the little summary, if you, like you said, a keyword at the bottom of each job, like here's all the stuff I used at this job. That was the old way of trying to get past the ATS, which
Yeah.
never really worked anyway. But it's, you got to say, yeah, how you use these things, what you
Yeah.
did with them. Like, again, it's about the results too. Like, not just that you did it.
I will say this though, even though I don't really like the keyword stuffing anymore, you can go into ChatGPT now and you can say, please look at the job description and do an evaluation. What are the top skills they're looking for, right? Like what is it, what is the most important and how they're ranking in the job description. So even though you're not just counting the keywords, that gives you an idea of what to put as the first bullets and what to make sure to include in terms of speak to these areas. Sorry, Justin, go ahead. I see you want to talk.
No, I think Elias touched on it in part one, which is the first things that come up in the job description. Those are the priority. But Trishana made a comment here, and I just want you to be aware, Elias, before we segue into the next section, which is the new default font for Microsoft is Aptos, which is the same font that's used in ChatGPT. So does that mean regular resumes that don't use ChatGPT copy and paste are now being also ignored for that same font? Just something
Well,
to.
yeah, if someone is using that as a weed out, as a thing to say this resume looks AI generated to me, maybe. I mean, personally, I've never paid any attention to the font that a resume comes in as. I don't care. Um, but I guess if that's a known, like
If
this
that's
is
a
the font
criteria,
ChatGPT
yeah.
outputs, and people are trying to, because everyone's trying to look for clues that this is a. They look for the M dashes, and they look for the verbiage, like spearheaded. I've never
I
seen so
hate
many
that
people
word.
having spearheaded
Hate
things
it.
in my 20 years until the last like 12 months. Now everybody's spearheading something. I'm
Yeah,
like, that is a ChatGPT word.
it is.
It doesn't mean it's a bad word. I'm not going to rule you out, but I think what you probably want to do, I personally, just knowing this now, I probably wouldn't send in a resume in Aptos. I mean, I know it's the default font. I would just change it just
Yeah,
because there are companies who are saying, we want to know if you used AI to build this resume and we're going to rule you out if you did. Don't give them a reason.
exactly. I think these last few minutes, we would like to take the chance to kind of close out with positive things. So, what are one or two things that you can do during an interview that would win you over if you were on the fence between different candidates? That's a question from Alan Resnick.
that's a tough one. And I want to answer one question, the thank you notes. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that was the second one,
Do
but
it.
you can do it in
Right.
reverse.
That's a quick one. Yes, write thank you notes. Most people don't. It is a way to stand out. It's probably not going to hurt you if you don't, because again, it's kind of most people aren't. I say do it. It's not
I
going to
did it.
hurt. Nobody's going to reject you because you wrote a thank you note, right? But it might show a little more interest in the job.
See,
I
that's
say
what I
yes.
said.
The
And I also
timing
said
of
if
it.
you've got the exact candidates,
Yeah, but
right?
is
Like
it
again, someone
timing?
does a thank you.
How
I
long
say
ago after the interview is a thank you
I
note? Minutes
I mean, I think
after, the day after? Because you
I think the
usually
Nothing.
day after.
rehash like a key
Oh,
point and you express that your interest and say thank you.
I don't think you have to go that deep. Honestly, I think
Okay.
you can just you can. I mean, you can if you want to, but I think I would just I think just a standard like the
he's
next day. Hey, thanks for your time. I'm really excited about this opportunity and the company. And if you touch it, I have seen people do that. I think I can be a
I
real
do.
contributor in this way or that way. I think that's fine. I don't. I mean, if you don't, if you just send a quick, hey, thank you for your time. I really appreciated meeting you guys. Can't wait to join the team. I think that's fine too.
Well, Justin's picking because I do it and I have a template. I always make sure if I can do it immediately after, I will. Otherwise, before I end the day, I get it sent out. And it's a template that says, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. I enjoyed hearing about XYZ,
Yep.
about the role. And I'm confident that I can assist with a different XYZ. I look forward to hearing from you, right? So it's a template that then obviously that gets filled in based on the role.
Yep.
It also says thank you for meeting me for this specific role at this specific company, right? So it looks more tailored and more like I took the time to do it versus the template.
Yeah,
now
you don't want it
now
to
all
be
the recruiters
generic.
out there are gonna be like, I'm not gonna believe your thank you letter
Yeah,
anymore.
you don't want it to be generic that it could just is
Right.
obviously cut and paste. But
Yeah.
I think it can be a simple one. It can be what you talked about, Elizabeth. I don't think it probably isn't swaying it too much one direction or the other. But I think it does help to do it because you are Most people don't. So it does give you that extra little thing where you're standing out just a little bit more than someone else. So the same question is true in the interview. How can you stand out? Um, Man, again, that's a tough one. I mean, because a lot of the reasons that, especially if you get to that, because especially I think Alan said the last couple of candidates, I can't tell you most of the time, those last two or three candidates, the companies are just kind of like, well, we just liked Alan a little bit better than the other,
Yeah.
than Justin and Elizabeth, so we went with Alan. And there's no real reason that they can even articulate in a lot of cases. The archaeology guy in my my previous example,
Yeah.
he articulated it, right? He brought it out. But a lot of times I think people don't even necessarily know why they're just leaning towards one person over another. They just feel like, well, I just thought Alan would work better with the team, or we just got along with him a little bit better. Because usually by the time you get to that last step, everybody's qualified, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have weeded out the unqualified people, the people no one liked, or whatever, interview one or two. You get to that final, it a lot of times it just comes down to really building that rapport and how did they like you opposed to the other candidates, unfortunately.
So, Elias, we got a few minutes left. You have written a new book that is going to help everyone. I'd love if you can just take a minute and explain what that is and how it can help. And I think we put the link in here already to share that with folks.
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's like you said earlier. It's called From a Recruiter's Brain. It's on Amazon. Um, those of you who've been around a while would recognize like the Mars Attacks style font on the cover. So, actually, I think I have one, a hard copy. This is what it looks like, so you can see. So it's basically a lot of the stuff that I talk about on LinkedIn, all that guidance all distilled down in there, and I've added a lot more, especially around dealing with recruiters,
Mm.
agency recruiters in particular, and how to work with us in contract roles, on permanent placement roles, good questions to ask, stuff that people would never know. The things that I try to talk about there, and I do put it on LinkedIn too, as much as I can, is stuff that people just don't know. If you're not a recruiter, you're not going to know how we use LinkedIn Recruiter, how we use Indeed, how we sort through resumes, how results are displayed to us, what the back end process is like. I'll give you an example. It's in the first section, which I call the secrets. A lot of contract jobs, we can only submit 2 or 3 resumes.
Mm.
Nope. How would
That's
you know
huge.
that?
Yeah.
So they reach out to dozens of people, but you're only going to submit 2 of them. How do you know if you're the one being submitted if you never ask? Also, companies will try to submit, or people will try to submit candidates for jobs they don't even have a contract for. They're not a client yet. So now your resume just got thrown at a company by an agency. The company didn't ask for it. You might be getting ruled out because a lot of companies don't like that. So
Mm.
find out, do they have a contract? Are they, there's a lot of stuff that, and I can't put it all on LinkedIn because I wouldn't be able to do my job if I just posted everything. It would be hard to keep up. But that's kind of the stuff that I try to talk about, is like what's going on behind the scenes in recruiting a little bit that might help you out.
That's awesome. So we can see there's going to be a lot of extra juicy tips and secrets that we can't get to in an hour in here. And where can people find you? Are you beyond LinkedIn right now or onto other social media or just LinkedIn?
Pretty much just LinkedIn right now.
Okay.
Although the one thing I did want to mention in this I'm pretty sure in January I'm going to start doing a maybe
Live.
bi-weekly From a Recruiter's Brain live, and try to just take questions like this because I can never answer them all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to get that. So if you guys are interested, just keep tabs on me on LinkedIn, I guess.
We'll share it to you. Just let us know and we'll go ahead and communicate that out as well. Well, this was amazing. I'm so happy that you were able to join us again. I'm sure we're going to try and get you again until you start doing your biweekly and then everyone's got you already. But please stay on for a second. Everyone, thank you so much for joining, for welcoming us into your homes or your offices. Next week's live is Agile Wars with Samina Fedor. It's going to be a PM versus Scrum Master versus Delivery Manager. We're going to go at it and really debate. So it should be a little bit different than our usual and a lot of fun. We're super excited. In the meantime, thank you for joining today. Thank you again, Elias,
Yes,
for
thank you,
joining, and we
Elias.
will see you guys next week.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.